Right. Okay. Here are our objectives for the presentation. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk about new pharmacy job market opportunities, where things are in the current market, talk a little bit about popular career options and how to make a career transition if that is something that you're interested in, or if you're a student that is tuning into this presentation, we'll talk a little bit about how to prepare to move into some of these careers. Let's start off by talking about kind of what is the state of the current job market. So what you'll see here are the results from a national workforce survey that was done in 2019 of about 5,000 participants. And what they found was that 35% of pharmacists at any given time are likely or very likely to search for a job. And if we take the number of pharmacists that are in the US right now, there's about 118,000 pharmacists, that means, that are looking really for a job at any given time. And interestingly, we did a survey on LinkedIn trying to gauge from pharmacy managers how many applications do they actually receive for any particular job posting. And you can see that the majority of managers responded that anywhere between 50 and 100 applications are being put in. And I would argue at this point, with a lot of remote roles and with COVID, that number has probably increased a little bit. But for the most part, we're seeing on average about 60 to 70 applications per position. And if we do a little bit of math here, there is about 15,000 graduates that are going to be added to the pharmacy market based on the number of pharmacists that will graduate pharmacy school in 2021 or in 2022. It's about 15,000. We have about 4,000 pharmacists that retire each year and about 3,000 right now that are unemployed. Because of kind of the current state of the job market, and again with COVID, there are about 1,000 jobs on average in the pharmacy market that are eliminated. We've seen this number has actually increased a little bit because of COVID and because of the financial status of a lot of different institutions. A lot of positions are cut, a lot of companies are kind of struggling financially. So if you do this math and you look at that 118,000 number of pharmacists that are looking for a job, you can see that there are substantially more pharmacists that are looking for positions than positions are available. So not all doom and gloom here. We saw a huge rush with COVID-19 as far as large chain pharmacies hiring pharmacists to help with vaccination clinics. Many positions went remote or started offering some level of remote option, either a hybrid of going in person and also being remote, or being fully remote and going in person occasionally. And we have kind of seen a lot of this COVID rush start to die off. A lot of folks that we have worked with that were hired in during COVID are finding that a lot of those positions are either getting cut, or of course there are new positions that are being created for which pharmacists are being hired on for more permanent positions. But certainly over the last year or so, we've seen quite a few positions that have opened that is really not as common, I would say, anymore, just as things have ebbed and flowed with the pandemic. That all being said, let's kind of jump into what pharmacist job trends are we seeing in the job market right now. We actually see that there is, which I found really interesting, an increase in the number of independent pharmacies that are either opening or expanding a lot of their pharmacy services. In Missouri, especially, I feel like there are so many great independent pharmacies that are doing some extremely innovative things, and we're seeing that continue to increase because of this push in the community setting to have vaccination clinics, have vaccination opportunities. And because a lot of pharmacies are bringing folks into the pharmacy itself or going out into the community and delivering some of these services, we're seeing that there is expansion of kind of other clinical services and opportunities as well. We hear a lot of interest in IT pharmacy. There's a lot of pharmacists that will come to us because they want to work with like LexiComp or Micromedex, or work with a company kind of similar to that that works in IT, or even work with some electronic medical records and integrating those into larger health systems. But really that continues to kind of ebb and flow as well. And those jobs are not really as, I would say that trend is not really as predictable as some others. Community pharmacies and health systems are hiring, probably not surprising if you're a pharmacist listening and you have been looking for a job in the past 6 to 12 months, you've probably seen this. And then, in pharmacy school, I really felt like there was an enormous push, of course, to pursue residency training, but we do see that clinical pharmacist positions, again, just continue to kind of be a smaller portion of the jobs that are available in the job market, with actually specialty pharmacy being a huge area for folks that have either community or hospital training to be able to move into some of those roles. Other job trends that we're seeing are that mail order pharmacies continue to grow, especially with Amazon's move into pharmacy. There was a report that came out called the Becker's report that actually showed that about 50% of patients are using mail order. And especially now with everything that's been going on, we're seeing a lot of patients kind of want to move in that direction. And I think that also is kind of pushing more of the jobs kind of in this space, and also with remote positions available. We do see quite a bit of movement as far as medical marijuana, health coaching, alternative medicine, and pharmacogenomics is a very sexy term, I think, in pharmacy right now, but we find that those jobs are very much still few and far between. But a lot of the health coaching opportunities are certainly there, and we'll go into that much more throughout the presentation. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the emerging and popular pharmacist roles. And really, we're kind of basing this, as far as this presentation from Happy PharmD, off of a couple of factors. A lot of these are career paths that pharmacists will initially identify when they are starting to work with us. This is based off of online surveys that we do on LinkedIn, and also just some job market data that we have access to, as far as what are roles that we're seeing continue to pop up on job market boards, that we're hearing in our circles among colleagues and with various institutions and pharmacies. The roles that are listed on the slide here that we're going to go into a little bit more detail on are the MSL, or medical science liaison role, remote positions that I've kind of alluded to a little bit, clinical roles, especially in specialty pharmacy, entrepreneurship, and then health consultancy. There are two roles that I would say also fall in this list that are not on the slide here, which include medical writing. Medical writing is something that actually a lot more folks than you think might be doing as kind of a side hustle, or even as a full-time position. A lot of people do it as kind of a freelancing opportunity, and there's lots of opportunities there if that's something that you want to start getting involved in or are interested in. And the other role is actually pharma. We're actually, I feel like, seeing in the pharmacy job market, the PBMs are really in the spotlight, but paradoxically, there's also this rush to kind of try to get into pharma and other positions that are not just the medical science liaison role. So let's first start by talking about the medical science liaison role. I will say, just kind of as a caveat, is that a lot of people come to us saying that they are really interested in transitioning into a medical science liaison role. Certainly, this role has a lot of opportunity for presenting data to clinicians, to other pharmacists, to be able to have some flexibility as far as working remotely and traveling. However, we have some coaches on our Happy PharmD team that do work in these roles and also work in the industry, and have really kind of shared with us that getting into a MSL role is very competitive. Most of the time, folks that are able to get these roles have a lot of industry experience or prior industry experience. Certainly, if you're interested in something like this, it's not impossible to move into a role without industry experience or connections, but we're really seeing that even though there are lots of MSL roles, that it still is really kind of tough to move into some of these positions. There are other positions within industry that are less competitive, where you could potentially stand out a lot more and would still be a great fit and a great role. We do some assessments as part of our coaching process to help folks identify what their strengths are, what are areas of interest for them. And if you think that you might resonate with some of these strengths that are listed on the slide, then this might be a role if you're, in a place where you want to consider a job transition or might want to consider one in the future that you might want to think about. We find that our clients that are successful in being able to move into and transition into an MSL role are those that are problem solvers. They really like looking at results. They like being able to teach others about those results and really simplify things into a digestible manner. And also, of course, because you are going to be talking about a specific drug or service, being able to persuade others to see what is the value in this is an enormous skill set to have and to bring to the table with this role. The next is remote roles, which not surprisingly are extremely popular right now. And because of that, there really kind of tend to be quite a bit of competition for these positions. There aren't a ton of advancement opportunities, and because of just the current state of where things are, it can be a potentially less predictable way to go as far as trying to find a remote position. However, if you fall into the category of being a provider or someone that is, able to sense other people's feelings or emotions, especially because a lot of remote clinical positions will still require you to interact with patients in video format, in telephone format, or in other unique ways using the technology that we have to work remotely now. It's really important that you're able to kind of sense what the patient needs or what other folks will need on your team and be able to kind of teach them as well. Because most of that, device teaching that we were doing in person, or even in the primary care space, doing a lot of the monitoring of some primary care disease states was happening in person. A lot of it is happening remotely. So having some of these strengths would be extremely beneficial if you're looking into a remote position. The next place that we're continuing to see as a popular role are clinical roles. These are very popular, like I said. This is kind of the traditional role that you think of in an ambulatory care setting or in a hospital setting where you are rounding perhaps, or having some sort of hybrid role where you're staffing and also have some clinical responsibilities. It is certainly possible to move into a role like this without prior experience, but you are going to be competing with other candidates that may or may not be residency trained or will have prior experience. And we really recommend that if you are interested in a role like this, to really do your research before you make a transition. Like I kind of alluded to earlier, a lot of health systems are struggling financially. And before making a step like this, we highly encourage anyone to make sure that you're doing your research about the financial health of that company and about the viability of that role kind of remaining where it is. Most clinical positions, and over time, we're kind of seeing that there's just a steady percentage of clinical positions as far as total number of jobs and percentage of jobs. But certainly, these are continue to be popular roles and everything. And similar to remote positions, if you are a provider and you really enjoy being able to work with patients and work with the medical team, this might be a role for you to consider. Entrepreneurship, interestingly, is an area that we are actually seeing a lot of people try to move into. There is a large kind of marketing and educational push online for folks to start their own businesses, to try to join others that are starting their own businesses. A lot of pharmacy influencers are kind of in the entrepreneurship space. And I think what we're kind of seeing is that a lot of people want the freedom that comes with being an entrepreneur, of being able to create your own hours, being able to start new things and try new clinical services or try a service that no one has before. But lots of work. And I'm sure if there are pharmacy owners or entrepreneurs that are in the audience, you can attest to this. Definitely not something that you maybe transition into right away, but is a decision that you prepare for and you take some time to think about. But this is definitely an area that is continuing to grow, especially as we're seeing kind of more independence expanding their roles and their opportunities in the community. And then finally, the last role that I'll talk about is health coaching. Health coaching is probably what we think of most when we think of the most popular kind of entrepreneur role for pharmacists. There are a few influencers in the pharmacy world that are doing this, and also a few influencers that have courses even on how to do this. It is a really kind of health coach role. But I would say that as far as other pharmacy careers and career paths, this area is quite nebulous. It's not as well defined. The bar is not really set super high or low. It's kind of still unclear about how to get into this space, who really is in this space, and there's really not a lot of openings or opportunities here. So although this is, an area that a lot of people are interested in and they come to us wanting to learn more about, this role really does take a little bit of time to kind of figure out and everything. And I would say a 1A off of this is pharmacogenomics. And that's another area where we're not seeing that kind of take off quite yet, as far as providers' offices requesting that information or being interested in that information. So just something to keep in mind. But we'll kind of keep rolling here and talk a little bit about some of the available jobs that are in Missouri and Illinois. So there is a website called JobRx, which is a website that is able to pull in job market data that is specific by state, by city, zip code, job type. And what it does is it looks online at the available job postings and puts them into various categories based on keywords. So if you've heard a job talk before, you'll probably hear that when you're making a resume or a CV, to make sure you have keywords, because job websites will kind of pick up on those things. Well, websites that collect that data have an algorithm that they use to be able to actually input that and be able to present it in a way to folks that are, utilizing the website. So what I'm going to do is present some categories of data nationally and then compare those to Missouri and Illinois. So the first is national job market data. We are currently in Q3, which goes from July to September. And I pulled the data that you're seeing on the slides here probably about 3 or 4 days ago. So this data is only maybe about a month or so old, but still definitely, I think, very impactful and beneficial, just to kind of give an idea of where things are right now. So nationally in Q3, we're seeing that the total number of pharmacist jobs lies around about 13,000. In Missouri, there were 255 jobs that were available in that set from 7/1 up until 8/23 timeframe, and 437 that were in Illinois. If we take a look at position type, so full-time versus part-time, you can see the breakdown listed on the slide here. And you can see that it's actually pretty consistent across the board, that about 50% of the jobs that are available are full-time positions. You'll see that there's this category called not employer defined that's on the slide here. And basically what that means is on this job website the JobRx website, the employer did not input enough information for this algorithm to be able to input that either into a full-time or a part-time position. So that's why there's this kind of undefined category, which I think is a great place to kind of pause and just mention that job websites are fantastic, and they do have available job postings on there. And I know when I was looking for my first position, that's kind of the route that I utilized. but often jobs are posted on job websites last. And a lot of the times, if you have looked for a job before or are looking for a job before, you'll see that those descriptions are quite non-specific. So it's really difficult sometimes to learn or figure out what the job posting actually is for or what it wants. And, we're kind of seeing this reflected in trying to collect data, that it's sometimes difficult to categorize and capture what those jobs are in a meaningful way when the way that they're posted is not always great. So that's kind of this not employer defined category that you see at the bottom. As far as jobs by subcategory, so this is actually the job title. So if you went on Indeed or LinkedIn right now and typed in pharmacist or clinical pharmacist, that's where these titles are coming from. So nationally, we're seeing about 1,600 clinical pharmacist positions. Most positions are categorized as just general pharmacist. And then there's a smaller portion that are supervisor roles or management positions. And then there's still kind of this undefined category. So you can see again across the board that we're seeing most positions are kind of categorized as pharmacists, with almost a like 50-50 split between just clinical and management, and then a smaller portion as undefined. This is actually, I think, a super interesting slide. So this goes through the job setting, but nationally and then in Missouri and Illinois. So if we look nationally, we're still seeing the data tell us that about 50% of jobs are in community settings, and that includes chain pharmacies, compounding pharmacies, independent pharmacies, and grocery store chains. The other 50% are hospital-based jobs, and that encompasses, long-term care, infusion, and then also other clinical and staffing roles. And then what you'll see at the bottom is this other category. And these are the jobs really that I think everybody is interested in and wants, and still really comprise only about 0.5 to 2% of the job market. So you can see that nationally, we've got about 26 jobs that came up as academia positions, 20 in IT, a couple in industry, quite a few in managed care, and then also in nuclear pharmacy. And then unfortunately in Missouri and Illinois, we didn't see a ton that were branded as falling into those categories, but certainly some opportunities for other positions. I think another thing I really want to kind of emphasize here is that, yes, the data kind of says that 50% of jobs are in community versus hospital, but if you are listening to this presentation now and you're in a position where you want to make a transition, it is absolutely 100% possible for you to find a position that you are passionate about, that aligns with your interests and your goals, and really does fall kind of into this other category if that's where you're looking to go. And, as a company and as a program, we really work with our clients to make sure that we are helping to prepare you for an indispensable career where you can have great networking skills, a great CV and resume, and can really have a lot more freedom as far as your time and really your efforts, and feel a lot more fulfilled in your current position. Okay, let's talk about jobs by cities. So nationally, you can see that most of the jobs are in Phoenix and Chicago. So some Midwest, some Southern states, a lot in Texas, California, and some, in the Midwest here in the South as well. Of course, larger cities have more jobs just based on the population. And then if we're looking at Missouri and Illinois, you'll see the asterisk by top 10 because St. Louis and St. Louis are categorized as two separate cities. So I combine those here. So that's why you're only seeing 9 cities listed. But most jobs actually in Chicago, and then of course, not surprising, in St. Louis, followed by Springfield and Columbia, Missouri, and then some other jobs that are available in some of the smaller cities that are in Illinois. And then Kansas City, of course, is also on our top 10 list. All right, let's kind of finish off this presentation with talking about your career strategy, how to confidently apply and transition into your next position. So we talked about where we're at in the job market. We've talked about some of the popular and emerging roles, what the data says about nationally, and then Missouri and Illinois. So now let's talk about, where do we find these jobs? So we'll talk about the best websites to find job postings, and then also this term that we use in our coaching process, which is called a referral system. Of course, not surprisingly, best pharmacy job websites will include Indeed, Glassdoor. You can see the number of job postings that are posted each year around that time frame with pharmacist positions. And then JobRx, of course, is a great place to go. If it's not a website you're familiar with, would highly encourage you to take a look at it and everything, because it does have quite a few options that are not listed on these other job websites. And then we'll get to LinkedIn here in a second. But company websites certainly are another place to possibly look for these positions. The reason that you saw LinkedIn as 2 question marks on there is because we don't have a great deal of time tonight to talk about networking and jump into a full discussion on networking. So as part of joining this presentation, you guys will get a link following it to our template and module about how to network using LinkedIn. It's a freebie for everyone that's on this, just as a thank you for joining the presentation, to talk about how to network via LinkedIn and why it's important to network via LinkedIn. But what we have found as coaches is that LinkedIn is the best website for creating what we call a job referral system. So if you think about right now, what is low in the job market? What is low in the job market? That is trust. So if we think back to the number of applications that a manager has to look through to select a candidate, if you're a manager and you have to look through 100 applications, you are probably going to move the people to the top that have either been referred to you by a candidate or by a current employee that went to your alma mater, that is from an organization that you know, a friend of a friend, to help you really identify a trustworthy candidate. So the bulk of our coaching about creating this referral system is about really how to network effectively. We've really seen and learned in the literature that networking really doesn't happen at networking events, at conferences. And there is a very meaningful way to network that doesn't feel slimy, like you're trying to get something from someone, but is really focused around relationship building and getting insider contacts. And we call these insider interviews. So being able to really find out kind of what's going on the other side in a company, and really be able to talk to people that are in positions that you're interested in, so that you can make the most informed decision about how to make a transition. It's probably no surprise that pharmacists really aren't trained well to be great storytellers. And the professional skills really that are kind of necessary to make an effective career transition, the top being communication, being able to tell your story, being able to talk about what you're passionate about, what you're interested in, what is your why. You've probably maybe heard that term in the pharmacy world now, but if you've never watched it, there's a great TED Talk by Simon Sinek. He talks about how to find your why and how to craft stories so that you can tell your unique story to an employer when you're on an interview, in your cover letter, in your networking. And really, in our estimation, our pharmacist clients who have been able to successfully transition are those who have been able to communicate well, effectively, and tell their story in a meaningful way. In our profession, we're really trained to be perfectionists. We collect data, we give information, we really don't story tell, but that is the crux of really how to make an effective transition, along with, of course, professionalism, leadership, and being able to manage your priorities. Something else just to, kind of keep in mind is that when you're trying to make a transition, you really want to focus, and what we focus on in coaching is 3 things: clarity, your system, and your strategy. Having clarity about where you want to go next, having a strategy of how you want to get there, and having a system to do that is a 100% guaranteed way to be able to transition successfully. So now that you know kind of what we need to do to be successful, let's talk a little bit about what pharmacists do instead, and what are kind of some of the common pitfalls that we see pharmacists doing that are not as effective or have not really proven to be as successful as some other techniques. If we think about the job market kind of as a jungle, there's countless ways not to survive. You can think about the fact that when you're in a situation where you are trying to navigate the job market and you're trying to figure out where to go, you kind of feel like you're in this job market jungle. So what do most pharmacists do? They say, okay, now I have to go and I have to work on my resume. I have to update my CV, which certainly that's something I would highly recommend is doing so. But, maybe I'll update my CV on a Saturday morning if I have some time. Maybe I will, if I'm not getting the jobs that I want, it's because of my resume. And really what we're finding is that yes, your CV and your resume are important. And we do a lot of coaching and training on how to build a resume and a CV that is effective and really helps to tell your story, because it truly is just a vehicle to be able to do that. But the resume is not everything. And a lot of the times where you should be at when you're submitting your resume is already having had conversations with the right people before that resume hits the manager's desk. The next approach that we see, and if many of you are listening, I'm sure you can probably relate. I'll raise my hand here. I can definitely relate to this, is the shotgun approach. Basically, this is saying, I'm just going to submit applications to every place I possibly can, anywhere and everywhere. Doesn't matter the job, doesn't matter the location. I'm just going to try to find a job. And what we're seeing too is that along those same lines is that people don't know how to network. So they're submitting these job applications, they're not hearing back, they're feeling frustrated, they're feeling overwhelmed because they're like, well, why can't I get a job? Why can't I get an interview? I'm doing my resume, I'm submitting all these applications. And it just kind of becomes this cycle of not being really moving towards where you want to be in the position that's actually right for you or meant for you. And then from that, a lot of pharmacists go into survival mode. They make decisions out of fear. They change direction on their journey. They don't know what they actually want. They take a worse job than what they wanted before, or they take a job just because they wanted a job and it ends up not really being what they wanted. And if this resonates with you, then just know that you're not alone. And the kind of first thing to do really is to stop, to stop what you're doing and really think, observe, and make a plan. When we stop and think, what do we like to do on a day-to-day basis? What is the greatest ratio that we can have of happiness, satisfaction, and fulfillment at work? When you think about your day-to-day, what is it that makes you feel excited? What is it that when you do it in your life, it really ignites something in you, that if you could do that one thing at work every day? Or another way to think about it is, if you had a really awful day at work, what is the one thing that you said, gosh, that was the one thing that made my day great? Or if I could just do this every day, it would make my job so great. Is that talking with patients? Is that working with providers? Is that being able to teach others? Is that being able to pioneer a new idea? Those are some questions and thoughts to maybe start considering and thinking about and simmering on and reflecting on, because it will really help to give you a little bit of clarity as far as when you're talking to a future employer and they ask you, why do you want the position, why you would be a good fit, you're able to show how what you're interested in, what you're passionate about aligns with that position and that company. And along with this is creating your unique career profile. So what do you love doing on a day-to-day basis, and how can you match that opportunity with a job so it can be the greatest ratio of happiness to time spent? I'm going to be honest, y'all, that we talk to a lot of pharmacists, and a lot of pharmacists are burnt out. They are not happy where they are. They want time to spend time with their families. They want to feel like what they're doing is meaningful. And a lot of pharmacists are, in positions where they don't feel like their skills are being utilized, and they don't know kind of where to go next. which kind of brings me to this concept called the ikigai. The ikigai is a concept, and it is Japanese for a reason for being. And basically what it does is it takes these 4 circles of what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you can be paid for. If you see, there's all these overlapping circles that if you look at what you love and what the world needs, that is your mission. If you specifically are looking at what the world needs and what people will pay for as your vocation, but what we really want to get pharmacists towards is what they're great at and what they can be paid for, so that it can actually be their profession and something that they're proud of. A lot of pharmacists come to us and they say, I don't even know why I chose pharmacy. There's no career opportunities, or I want to get out of pharmacy altogether. And really, when you think about if you're in a position like this, or even if you're not, but you are thinking about making a career transition for other reasons, or even if you're happy in your career and you just want to think about how to continue your advancement or continue your involvement, or really get involved in something that you haven't been. Think about what are the themes of work that are in your life. Take a step back and think about what is happening in the job market. When was the last time maybe you looked on Indeed or LinkedIn or a company website, and what are you seeing? In your company right now, what's some movement that you're seeing? What positions are they hiring for? And starting to just kind of collect all those pieces of data to help you make the best decision. And finally, you have to make a plan. I'm not going to lie that choosing a path is difficult, especially if you haven't heard back from employers, or you've interviewed, but you haven't transitioned, and you're concerned about the next job maybe not being the right fit for you. So a list of common questions that candidates have for us are, how do I stand out in the job market? How do I know what career path to choose? And how do I know if the next job is going to be worse than my current job? And I will tell you that if this is you, that you should consider getting a coach. We have some resources that we want to share with all of you after this call today. All that will happen is you'll get an email. You're getting with, I think it's going to be coming from Stephanie from the Alumni Association, with a link that you'll just put your name and your email address, and you'll get our Ultimate Pharmacy Career Guide resource, our 2021 Pharmacist Salary Guide, which shows salary trends throughout the year, what jobs are starting to pay more versus pay less, what are some of the career options that you may or may not be aware of. And also, I'm happy to at any point book a time with any of you. Of course, UHSP is my alma mater, and really I would love to have a conversation or a dialogue if you're interested. This is not a commitment at all. Just if you're in this position and you want to talk about where you're at, you want to talk about how you can be an indispensable pharmacist and discover hidden job opportunities and learn how to get interview requests. And if you just want to be in a better position, please, feel free to book a time with me. This link will also be included in all of that material that will be, sent out to you and everything. As coaches, we really hold our clients accountable. We help them create the future that they desire. We help them create their story, and we help them to really overcome their fears, because the truth is that you have all the skills that you already need to successfully transition into another position. And most pharmacists are not very confident. We find in talking to pharmacists that they do not have confidence in their abilities, and we really do what we can to try and help pharmacists feel more confident in who they are and be able to find a position that's a good fit. So here's some of the information that I talked about today. The Ultimate Pharmacist Career Guide that you'll get, the Career Jumpstart module that we have about networking, and also some other kind of goodies here. If you're interested, go to happypharmd.com/UHSP. And our founder and CEO, Alex Barker, actually wrote a book called Indispensable, which is about how to become an indispensable pharmacist. And that is available free for you guys in both an audiobook and a digital form. If you go to that happypharmd.com/UHSP website, website and put in your name and email, you'll immediately get access to all of this. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing. If you guys have any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves or drop some questions in the chat box. We've got this time until 8 p.m. So please feel free to ask any questions. I'm happy to answer to the best of my ability. So thank you all for tuning in and for listening. Thanks, Jacqueline. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks, Andrew. Any questions from folks? Anything about job market data, job transitions, how it is living in sunny Nashville?
I was going to ask you, do you have a source that you can share regarding the expansion of independent pharmacy in general for nationwide and Missouri statistics?
Yeah, sure. So I don't have specific stats about Missouri independent pharmacies, but if you want to, Ashley, thanks so much for your question. If you want to send me an email, I will message you in the chat box. And if you just want to shoot me an email, I can send you some resources.
Thank you so much. That was my first love and where I initially went into the workforce. And now I'm in federal sector and happy in a clinical position, but I'm always very supportive of my independent pharmacy colleagues and everything they're doing out there for us.
Yes, absolutely. And we're so excited just overall to see that I'm very similar. My background is in independent pharmacy. I feel like that's kind of where I grew up as well. So, love to see that independent pharmacies are really expanding into the community, that they're being utilized for COVID-19 vaccines and other efforts on a public health level. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to share those resources with you. Any other questions?
So I've recently started precepting students again. It took me 3 years because government time, but one of the things I've noticed is that so many of them just don't have a plan, like as far as what they're going to do going out of pharmacy school. And that's not something I can really relate to from my student experience. Mm-hmm. What is your approach to counseling folks that are in that P4 year on kind of making that decision as they transition from student to workforce?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I would say I definitely echo that sentiment, Ashley, that I feel like we have got a lot of students who really struggle to know what they want to do. I actually have a couple of clients who are recent grads and definitely would say that that's a very similar mindset and an attitude that they have. And I would say that, a way that I really try to encourage P4 students, I also have students on rotation myself, is I encourage them to look at Indeed and LinkedIn and just to see what are the jobs that are out there, to get some practice just being able to look at some of those things. I also encourage students to, if there are states that they're interested in moving to or institutions they're interested in looking at, or even if they're with you at your institution, to look at the institution's job postings and just to see what are some of the options that are available. I try to get students, I do actually a presentation to my students about different career paths in pharmacy, kind of similar to I did today. And I try to get them connected with folks that are in those fields and areas. So I would say just getting them to just generally look at job boards and job websites. And then I would say also another point of encouragement is just to have them connect with folks on LinkedIn and try to see if there are people that are doing some really unique things and reach out to their particular college of pharmacy career. I think most colleges of pharmacy have some sort of career center of looking at alternative careers and if they can connect with someone that's graduated from that institution that's doing that. So I try to just direct them in a bunch of different ways and have that conversation about the fact that there are so many opportunities that are not just community and hospital. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, I think it is. And I thank you for that. I know One of my really close mentors throughout pharmacy school, she's actually a consultant pharmacist. She's the reason that we actually have that designation available for a license to be a consultant pharmacist. She was kind of the pioneer for that from Missouri. Her name is Sandra Bollinger. And, it's just, I think it's hard for pharmacists sometimes to think outside the box, and it's perfectly okay to think outside the box. It's just not a part of our natural sense of self as type A algorithmic people.
Yes, for sure. And I think it's a challenge too, because I think, and of course we're all alums here and perhaps some students are on, but there is a big push to pursue postgraduate training, which I did that myself and it was a great fit for me, but just the acknowledgement that it's really not a great fit for everyone. And I think I also try to encourage, Ashley, my students, that if they don't want to do that, it's really okay. And it doesn't make them any lesser than, and that all pharmacist positions and sectors are important. And at the end of the day, we all just want to do a good job. And so I think that that's just another encouragement, is that, I don't know that we're always exposed to some of this during school. And a lot of this is just based kind of on my own experience now being a coach and doing my own research and preparation for coaching. So I think that I would totally agree that, there's some really amazing pioneers doing some great things, and we should continue to spread the message of different career paths. Other questions? Thanks so much, Ashley. I appreciate the conversation. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts? All right, well, I will stay on for a few extra minutes here. Again, I'm going to put the link in the chat here for everyone to see. If you are interested in accessing some of that information, please feel free to go to thehappypharmd.com/UHSP, and you can put in your name and email and it will send all that straight to your inbox. If you're interested in talking with me, please feel free to book a time. Like I said, this is not a coaching commitment. This is not necessarily even just a plug for coaching. Missouri has a special place in my heart, born and raised there, of course, went to UHSP, and would love to just have a conversation. If you're in a place where you want to make a career transition, if you just want to talk, I'm happy to do that too. So, please feel free to schedule a time and to book a time if you're interested. I'm going to put the link in the chat here. But yes, I will stick around for a couple extra minutes if y'all have any questions. Thank you so much for attending and for supporting and everything. Very much honored to speak with the alma mater after being graduated for a couple of years.
Well, thank you again, Anna, and thank you for highlighting that there are multiple pathways. I did not do postgraduate training because I walked into a clinical position right out of school in the private sector, so it didn't make any sense for me to kind of take that pay cut when I could walk into a true clinical position. And so I really try to let my students have that opportunity to talk to the folks who are residency trained, and that way they can weigh out those pros and cons for themselves and decide what's going to be the best fit for them. Thank you for having voice to that, because I think so often in academia, we kind of neglect that for our students.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much. It's an honor and definitely very excited to be on and be able to talk about this. And coaching has just been such a great opportunity. I've really enjoyed it. So.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a great evening.
Thanks, you too.